very good afternoon to our viewers and welcome to the 1873 TV, Your Vision, Your Power. My name is Tinashe Mpasiri. This afternoon on the 1873 TV, we bring you yet another insightful and informative show where we look at the SMM Special, Unpacking Vendor Finance and what ignorance can produce. Joining me this afternoon in order for us to be able to unpack that aspect of vendor finance is Mr. Mtumwa Mawere. Mr. Mawere, a very good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon.
And we also happen to be joined by we'll be joined shortly by Mr. Owen Magocha as well as Mr. Frederick Kayo as we get into this discussion and be able to unpack this issue of vendor finance. Mr. Mawere, I think the purchase of AN7 as well as the New Age Media is what also got us to be talking about vendor finance on one of the 1873 WhatsApp platforms. And the need for us to invest in literacy as far as vendor finance is quite evident, considering that such terms are not, or concepts are not very well understood, and there's no shared understanding of these aspects.
Yeah, I think when we look at forms of financing, whether it's an asset, whether it's a right, an asset is an object of value.
That's it.
And you could also purchase intellectual property.
Yes.
Patents, copyright, and the licenses to do something. So when you purchase, there's a consideration. And how do you finance that purchase? I think you just went through a real estate transaction. First, as you went through it yourself, there was what? An offer to purchase.
This was an offer to purchase, definitely.
Then what happened?
After the offer to purchase, there was an aspect whereby all these documents were required by the bank itself.
Yeah. And I think Mr. Kyle. Hello.
Hi, Mr. Moiri.
How are you doing?
Good, and you?
Excellent. How is the Republic of KZN?
The Republic of KZN is very stormy, cold, and miserable. I almost feel like being in Zimbabwe at the moment.
It's cold.
Yes, it's a big storm here.
Oh. Last week they were playing your video on ZimEye.
What is that?
With the kids, the orphanage, as first lady.
Oh, the good old days. Good old days. Good old days.
They wanted to check whether it's Mr. Kyle. So Mr. Kyle was there. Yeah.
So celebrity status, here we come.
Yeah, so we just, I think what brought this interesting topic is the acquisition of Africa News Network and the New Age by a certain Mr. Jimmy Manyi. And I think is Magocha available as well. That acquisition, they have called it vendor financing arrangement. Some people think Mr. Manyi has provided the capital, when in truth and fact, that may not be the case. So we have maybe a session to promote literacy around the idea of financing assets. Because ordinarily you may find that the perspective or the standard that is used in our understanding of asset acquisition is not a shared one. There are people who believe you must pay cash in exchange for an asset. as we do when we go to cash and carry, we go to and pay for our groceries in Pick and Pay or Walmart, whatever it is. There is some understanding or misunderstanding as to what is taking place. And when you see a lot of people becoming communist or socialist, you may also be shocked that most of the socialists or communists, they really don't understand the underlying transactions taking place. And when you look at SMM, you also discover that there was no understanding as to the true nature of the transaction. So maybe we start with SMM and see what the minister is saying in his own words. So if we go down on the affidavit, so for people who can't see it, have you directed them so that they know where to see the...
So for the benefit of the viewers, a link is also being shared on Zimbabwe Today, where you can easily just redirect to the 1873 TV Facebook page, where you are able to view this document as well.
Okay. So we look at, I think, paragraph 21. At all material times until SMMH had been owned by TNN, a company registered in England and Wales. In this case, it will be the company of the Guptas, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. That owns the NN7.
As well as
Yeah, the New Age. Then on or about 7th March 1996, Zimbabwean born, and the emphasis, Zimbabwean born, Mr. Mutuma Zivamawere. Why is the Zimbabwean part mentioned? It will become clearer. Through his company, Africa Resources Limited, and in the case of Mr. Mani, there's a company with an L, is it? It's called... Mr. Magocha, are you around? Advocate Magocha. Huh? Okay. All right, so we can go ahead, yeah? It says Mr. Mani used the vehicle. It's an interesting name. Have you got it, Mr. Carl? Have you been following?
I'm listening. I've got no idea on the structure for the ANN transaction, so I'm following what you guys are saying on that.
Okay. It talks of an SPV. It says Infinity Media Networks. That is the legal entity that owns the ANN7 Proprietary Limited. And this is the company that was valued, when was it? In 2015. Business enterprise value 52 million, 100% equity value 40 million. And then 3 years later, the company is sold for 450 million rand. If you believed in inflation, then this is a good inflation. And Mr. Mani bought this company using an SPV. which is a special purpose vehicle. And that is the company that then acquired 100%. It's called Lodidox.
Owned by?
Lodidox, it's owned by Mr. Mani.
Okay.
And acquired for 300 million, along with its 2/3 stake in the New Age Media, the publisher of TNA, for 150 million, for a total of 450 million. So when you look at TNN, in this case, the Infinity Media will be the SMMH in the UK, beneficially owned by TNN. So Chinamasa, this is what he says. A company registered in the British Virgin Islands, after saying Mtuma Mawere is Zimbabwean born, I guess a company cannot be Zimbabwean born.
And we are fortunate that Advocate Owen Magocha has joined us now on Skype.
Advocate Magocha, are you online?
Yes, I'm online. Good evening, Mr. Mawere. Good evening, Mr. Mpasiri, and our listeners.
Very good evening to you.
We also have Mr. Kyle, Frederick Kyle.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Frederick Kyle. How are you?
Good in you.
Great.
So we're just trying to compare and contrast the SMM acquisition and the acquisition by Lodidox. A vehicle of Mr. Manye. My vehicle was a company called Africa Resources Limited. Manye acquired a shelf company that is then used to be the vehicle to acquire the shares owned, I think the shares in Infinity Media. So, in my case, we're just reading Chinamasa's affidavit. He says a company registered in the British Virgin Islands concluded an agreement with TNN for the purchase of the entire share capital of SMMH. THZ Holdings, a private company limited by shares and registered in England, and TAP through a sale and purchase agreement, the SPA. In terms of the SPA, the shares in SMMH and THZH were purchased by ARL for 60 million, payable over a period of 12 months in monthly installments of 5 million each, commencing April 1996 through a leveraged buyout. The shares in TAP, the TAP shares, were purchased as part of the same transaction for $1. The purchase price for the SMMH and THZ shares were to be financed from the operations of SMM. Similarly, and by virtue of the same indivisible transaction, the TAP shares were to be financed from the same source. Simultaneously with the signing of the SPA, the parties entered into a memorandum of deposit and charge, in terms of which ARL pledged the SMMH, and THZ shares to TNN as security, giving TNN certain rights as mortgages in the event of ARL defaulting on any of its payments. So you understand the transaction?
Yes, I understand the transaction.
Okay, and coming to the famous transaction now, where we start from a valuation which should appear from the facts available that the valuation became pregnant over the last 3 years. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. I'm with you.
From 40 million to 450 million.
Mr. Moiri,
Yes.
I would slightly disagree that the valuation might be overvalued, as we don't know what the assets were that was bought 3 years ago and how the business has changed or increased in value. So I think it will be premature to make speculation without understanding the underlying mechanism or growth of these companies.
No, what you normally do is, in terms of valuation, if you are buying shares, you are buying the right to receive income as a shareholder, which will be in form of dividends. So ordinarily, the valuation will be based on earnings. Unless you are buying assets with the hope of working again for the money you've paid. So there are...
I hear what you say, but I mean, it's wrong for us to speculate without underlying facts as to the valuation of assets and earnings.
In fact, that's why...
It's rather safe to say they bought a company, they've now sold it.
Yeah, I'm saying is when you are looking at, I think what Mr. Manyi is talking is saying it's a toxic asset. And ordinarily, even before we speculate, toxic assets also produce toxic valuation.
Well, that's his own problem for making that kind of allegations.
I think when we then deal with the underlying motivation for the acquisition, what is being alleged is that this transaction fits in the mold of what? Of radical economic transformation. And as such, is premised on transforming the way government spends its money in the media. And presumably this transaction positions the company to then redirect advertising spend. So you are buying something today, and then the next day you're supposed to present your blackface again to work for the same value that you paid. When in actual fact, what should obtain is that you should buy the asset as is with its challenges. And then if you can turn it around, then as a black person with no 450 million, because for you even to start enjoying any income, you would have to dispose to part away with 450 million. So if it's a share purchase, then after tax, it will be not 450 million. It will be 450 million plus the tax applicable to the income that you would need to generate that. So all we are saying is that the difficulty with these transactions that are vendor financed, sometimes the vendor may not be generous because you are on your knees when you are negotiating and you don't have the money. So you may end up with an apple that is rotten inside. It's just a point just to give a context. Because when you're talking about vendor financing, people think that it's an arm's length transaction. Because the same seller is the same guy who is going to give you the financing. And you then acquit the obligations over time. I don't know, Advocate Magosha, whether it's understandable what I'm trying to explain.
Yes, I understand what you're trying to say, that when it comes to a vendor financing, it's a very complicated issue, if you can say. But then if we try to relate to the SSM acquisition, I see that you have tried to give us some basic understanding of the background. When you link it to the issue of South Africa, like Mr. Mzwanele Manyi, at the moment you do not have the terms of the specific agreement, so that we can discuss further about it. But there are basic terms that we can look up to when it comes to a vehicle finance loan agreement per se. Because when it comes to yours, ARL, with the acquisition of SSM and SMM and THZ, you see, there are basic things that you must understand when it comes to the loan agreement. Like, firstly, how much is being borrowed, And here in the instance, we know the amount that is being borrowed. And then what is the interest rate?
Yeah.
What is the interest rate? Because when getting to this kind of agreement, they get the price that they want. There's no negotiation. They get the price that they want. They can inflate it, as much as they want, because you are at knees then when it comes to that. So we need the interest rate. And then what is the time schedule? They told us that, for the SMM and THZ acquisition was a 12-month or 2 years.
13 months.
It was 18 months, you see. And then if you know the time schedule, then you want to know what is the repayment time schedule, like what is being paid every month. In your case, it was 5 million. But in this case of Logidocs, we don't know what is their repayment time schedule like every month. And there are other things that are involved, which makes it a very risky transaction. For instance, they need security. You have told us that already, that ARL pledged SMM and TXZ security in the event of default. But now when we look at Logidocs in the acquisition of the NN7 and New Age, this is a shop company that was, dormant for 2 years, and it just became active in June. So now I want to understand what kind of security is provided for 450 million rand. I know that, when it comes, the vendor can also request personal from the director, personal guarantees, but I don't know if he has, so much security. What makes it very shady is that what security has been guaranteed for the acquisition of NN7 and the New Age with a company that is like 3 or 4 months old? What kind of security has motivated the vendor to be involved in such a kind of agreement? Well, there are different securities that the vendors can request. They can they can request a chattel mortgage, a general security agreement, personal guarantee, and all those things. But what kind of security is being provided? At least SMM, we know the kind of security that has been guaranteed. It was the shares of SMM and TIC. So I think in this case, what makes it a muddy story is that the Orb Bay actually owns this NN7 and New Age for a very long period. This is air. Mr. Mzwanele Manyi has nothing to, he owns nothing literally, because they need security. So they're going to have security of the very same shares that is purchasing until they are actually satisfied that is discharged, which can take many years. You understand?
Yeah, I think what we are.
Mr. Moeri,
Yeah, okay.
let me try and clarify. I think there's a misconception between the securities and ownership. In the case of the Gupta sale, those shares transferred with immediate effect, which means that they've inflated the selling price. which now will attract capital gains to them that of 51.1 million rand they got to pay on the sale, above and beyond the money they've loaned this party to acquire it. The listeners and the public must understand the difference between ownership and securities. The fact that shares were pledged as securities or suretyships have been given as security doesn't attract of ownership. This guy has become the lawful owner of this entities.
No, lawful.
His special purpose vehicle. He has a counter obligation to pay, and if he doesn't pay, then there is securities to be realized to the relevant value. So I don't think the Gupta's done themselves a favor because they're now liable for 51 million rand tax.
But also,
capital gains.
Yeah, I think it's important to separate the transactions, what is security and what is the consideration. I think from what we have been able to gather, there are two parties. One is the seller and the other is the purchaser. In this case, there is a company that is owned by Mr. Manyi that we can call a special purpose vehicle that was set up for the sole purpose of acquiring shares in Infinity Media. And there are two entities involved. There is the ANN7, which is the television side, and the New Age, which is the print side, the newspaper side. So the total combined value is, we are told, 450 million. So presumably there was an offer to purchase the shares by Mr. Manyi's company to the holder of the shares in Infinity Media. And an agreement was reached that the value of these securities or shares was 450 million, as agreed to between the two parties. Obviously, the seller, in this case, the Guptas, or whatever the vehicle they are using, would attract capital gains in respect of the transaction. But what we do know is that Mr. Manyi, like the special purpose vehicle, does not have the money to discharge the obligation to the seller in the amount of 450 million. That is known by the seller, that is also known by the buyer. So there are no surprises. And secondly, banks would have intervened like a normal purchase of real property, where I make an offer to purchase a house and the seller agrees and I agree, we conclude an agreement. Then we go to the bank for the purpose of financing this transfer between the seller and the buyer. In this case, the seller, after the agreement, assumes the role of the bank and then turns around and says, I'll give you a loan of 450 million subject to you producing the money. So presumably, the two companies that are purchased would then be the companies that would generate the money to be able to discharge the obligation. The same as SMM. That was a producing asset in Zimbabwe, although the transaction was in the UK. Ideally, you would then use the assets to pay off the obligation. The sooner you can do it, the better. And Mr. Kyle, you remember the issue of financial assistance that we went through on another transaction.
Yes, prior to the change of the South African Companies Act,
Yeah.
financial assistance in a scheme similar to this would have been prohibited.
That's right.
Lawful. But with the new Companies Act, they do make provision for this, subject to various requirements, the lending company meeting the test that it's not insolvent at the time of the advance and so forth. But if the old Companies Act was still in play, this whole transaction would have been contrary. I think it was Section 145.
Was it section 38 or something? Of the old Companies Act.
Yeah, the old Companies Act. This
58, I'm not sure.
prohibited.
Yeah.
We can always find clarity on that. But with the new Companies Act, this kinds of transactions are not prohibited.
Okay. So
They
it's
might be-
it's not that is not prohibited. It's actually under certain conditions, because solvency is part of it. Because
Correct.
I can't enter into a financial transaction after which the company itself becomes insolvent and is paying money to a creditor who was a former shareholder of the company. So it's deemed to be a preference to a shareholder. That payment would constitute a preference. So in this case, you have a buyer who is a man of straw, and you have a seller who has got an asset that presumably is performing. They have struck an agreement. And now they are coming to the public to say, this agreement has been done in your name. Because you now have to direct your advertising spend through this vehicle so that I pay off the obligation for the acquisition of the shares. Because if the underlying company does not attract advertising revenue, then there is no prospect of this deal having any legs to a destination where transfer of ownership actually takes place. So it becomes a promise rather than effectively a vesting of rights. So I'm giving you, like a dog, a promise that if you run fast, you catch some meat. But if you don't run, you won't get the meat. So nothing changes. So what then means is somebody must have promised that allow me to take your position, and the prejudice or disabilities that you may suffer because of this state capture, I would then enter into your position. So if I absolve you of whatever impediments that may have been caused by all these exogenous factors, then it means the transaction is kosher. But one would have to say, I saw something in the Huffington Post, an article says Gupta's selling price for NN7 and TNA is reportedly 10 times too high. And they do present that the 450 million paid by Jimmy Manyi for the two companies appears to be too much, according to a valuation concluded 2 years ago. I said
2015.
In 20, yeah, I was more than generous there. Because,
Now, Mr. Mawere,
yeah.
yes, I wanted to ask you, while you are comparing the two acquisitions of the entities, did you sign a power of attorney to the vendor when you acquired, when ARL was acquiring SMM and THZ? Was there a power of attorney?
No, in that case, there was a memorandum of deposit and charge that then provided for the eventuality where a default could occur.
Yes, because in cases like this, you can have a power of attorney to the vendor to say in the event of default, the vendor has rights to regain control of the business or licenses, like anything that can make the business operate lawfully. They can regain all those licenses.
No, in fact, what normally happens is you have a sell and purchase of shares agreement or sale of shares. You also have a loan agreement. And you have a security and pledge. Is it a session?
Session and pledge.
Session and pledge agreement that then secures the obligation. In the event of you not performing as anticipated, the power of sale is vested in the mortgager, who is the vendor. So like a house, if you fail to discharge your obligation to the bank, yeah.
Sorry. Can we just clarify to the readers that even with a power of attorney, which is a mechanism to speed up the process, or the power of the mortgager, it cannot be exercised without going to court, without first obtaining a judgment against a person that says he's liable, and thereafter getting consent from the court to exercise your rights in terms of your securities. Because the way we are presenting it, it seems that these guys can at any given moment, by a swipe of the pen, get back the company. It doesn't work that way. Once ownership has been transferred, you cannot exercise your securities without following a proper court process.
Unless you are Chinamasa, then obviously you are the law.
But Chinamasa is a state.
No, I mean you can.
Independent state.
No, you can create facts.
Mr. Frederick is saying, Mr. Frederick is very correct. He's just giving a clarity that the power of attorney or the regaining of control of the business can only be done through legal processes. It's not an automatic weapon that the vendor has in their pocket, that at any given time, they can automatically take over the business. So definitely that's correct, that, a legal process, there must be a judgment that will give that into effect. But at the same time, it's a very big risk for this man,
In fact, he has nothing to lose. There is no risk to him at all, because a 0 plus 0 is 0. And even if they put
Can I just come back a moment?
Yeah.
Can I ask, was there, because traditionally, when you have this kind of model like a vendor finance, traditionally there's an initial payment that is made by the purchaser. You can call it a deposit or initial payment.
It's not necessary. It's not necessary because there are two parties who are in agreement. So you can even go.
You get that too much finance from the seller, too much finance financial assistance from the seller to the purchaser. It can reduce the buyer's commitment in the long run.
No, the buyer simply has nothing. He just enters into a house, and there's nothing to lose. You may stay for 1 month, and you are chucked out. Huh?
Do we have a clarity that Mr. Mani paid?
No, I'm telling you, Mr. Mani has already said I used a special purpose vehicle with no balance sheet. So, to all intents and purposes,
there's no commitment.
No, it's not that he has no commitment, but you can also get a property finance 100%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. depending on the value of the property. So it's,
Mr. Wiri,
yeah?
Mr. Wiri, Council's highlighted a very important point because I think we're distracting ourselves too much from the Gupta saga and vendor finance. Is that there's got to be this legal process, and in the SMH saga, there was no legal process.
No, I'm saying, no,
Whatsoever.
in fact, that point I wanted just to clarify as well. I think you made a good point. The point you see, because for me to pledge something, I must be in possession of that something. I can't.
It's not possession. It's not possession.
No, I'm saying is that
Possession.
if
You cannot
no,
pledge more rights in something
No.
than you have.
No,
You
what?
don't own it.
No, what I'm saying is that for me, the transaction goes in two phases. First, there is a sale of shares. I have to acquire shares,
Yes.
100%, on a nominal basis. And the shares will be issued in my name, like title, the right title and interest. That vests.
Correct?
I can only pledge that which I've already acquired in the first place.
100% correct.
So
You haven't acquired it, you can't pledge it.
I can't pledge it. So the protection comes from the law will then protect me because I have the right to the shares. But the payment obligation is secured by a pledge of something, of security, which is the same shares. So the power of sale vests with the mortgager, subject to the court, because in terms of the Constitution of South Africa, if that is the applicable law, if there is any civil obligation between two parties, that dispute can only be resolved by a court of law. So I think it's section 34 of the Constitution.
Correct.
So
It's a guaranteed right.
you have guaranteed rights. So I have the full protection of the law. What you can claim, first you must have a court order, which means I have failed to pay and I'm unable to pay. And if I'm unable to pay, therefore the power of sale kicks in favor of the mortgager, who is the vendor. So it is the vendor now who then has the right to what? To recover the shares. Yeah?
The normal process, and these contractual agreements might differ unless it's contractually agreed, is if the mortgager has now obtained the right to sell, it has to be sold through a public sheriff's auction. It doesn't mean by default, if you borrowed money from the bank, ownership goes back to the bank.
No,
There's a legal process to follow to realize value in your securities, as you're only entitled to the money, unless they've specifically agreed that the shares will be sold back to them at the same or equivalent value.
no,
In
now
the
you,
absence of the right to buy it back on the agreed value, these shares will then have to go to public auction.
no. In fact, you are giving a lecture to Chinamasa. I think that's a valid lecture. That even if there is default, you actually have no right to substitute and say
Ownership.
and say because you have failed, therefore you have renounced any rights to that property. Because it doesn't mean failure to pay constitutes a default until it's tested in a court of law. So you have heard Chinamasa, I think Advocate Magocha, you have heard Chinamasa say, Mawere did not pay for SMM. which is the classic ignorance that plays its part. That is not your house, it's the bank's house. No, the bank does not acquire the house, does not need the house. It is my house until the bank has exercised its rights in terms of the applicable law.
But we must know at the same time that possession and ownership are different things. In the case you can mix it.
No,
Possession is not
the possession, what we call,
ownership is not possession.
yeah, is right, title, and interest. So as long as I have a right to something, and I have title to it, and I have an interest in it, then you can't substitute my interest, you can't substitute my title, you can't substitute my what?
The right, the
Title
and interest.
and interest, yeah.
Mr. Moeri, council raises a very good point, and you've highlighted right, title, and interest. It's three separate legal issues.
Yeah,
And we're not dealing with rights or interest, we're dealing with title.
that's right.
You might have a legal interest in a matter,
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean you own the product or asset in question. By having the shares as security means they've got a legal interest in those shares. It doesn't mean they own them.
No, in fact,
Transferred.
ownership is sometimes an abused term. And thanks for correcting that. Title gives you interest anyway. And if you have title, you have rights that are inherent in the possession of that property called what? Called title. So if you register a car in my name, I have the title in my name. So if the car evaporates or some other miracle, I'll be the first one to know that my relationship with this object of value has been altered. And therefore, I have a right to assert my claim against it. But I cannot just go and grab the car, even if I'm a bank. You see me at a shopping mall, then you go and hijack my car.
Well, they do try that, Moeri. They do try.
No, they do try, but that is working outside the four corners of the law. Because they need an order of court. And sometimes you may come to me and I may be some other first lady of another country, then I'll box you.
So things.
Because why did you come to take my car? So it's not very obvious for you just to venture naked and beautiful. You may end up with a little correction.
Mr. Moeri, I think you've highlighted a very, very important epidemic facing society today, is that just the members of society seems to be jumping up and down, commenting, expressing views and opinions on matters, whilst they don't understand the subject matter.
That's true, and that is the common thing. And we have many commentators who don't understand the subject matter.
So I think
people need to understand the context and understand the basic principles before they can open their mouth and speak.
but you see, the velocity of speaking is so tempting that people would rather speak and then apply their minds after speaking. So I guess it's a constitutional right to be ignorant, is it?
It seems that way.
you can't cure it by countering it. But the tragedy of life is that you can't monopolize wisdom.
True.
So most of the people who speak on these matters and they say we want to own something, they actually don't understand what ownership is.
That's why I said ownership and possession are not the same things. You can be in possession of something that does not belong to you, or you can have ownership of something that is not, in your possession.
In fact,
But I think
Advocate Mama Goja, the biggest problem is that while you are trying to explain it, you are also falling into the trap of the mischief of the word. Because the
that
possession itself is a relationship with an object of value. And itself signifies something. And then second is when you are looking at what is it that we call ownership legally, from a legal construction, you may find that even the most able judges will not be able to unpack it.
So just resting on this matter, let's just put it in relation to the two cases that we are dealing with at the moment. When it comes to the issue of SMM, can we just conclude so that the viewers are listening and the listeners are online and they would want to know, did Africa Resource Limited own SMM and TXZ?
Africa Resources acquired the right, title, and interest.
But there was no ownership.
That is ownership.
No,
The title is ownership.
Yes.
Mwere, you're confusing the listeners.
Okay.
The bottom line is that ownership in the shares went to ARL when that $1 was paid. So ownership did transfer.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's title. The name of the holder of shares was then changed to Africa Construction Limited, a subsidiary of Africa Resources Limited, pursuant to that transaction. So the title transferred hands. So the holder of the shares became ARL subsidiary company. So that was a complete transaction. Then the consideration for it was to be paid in an agreed format. That's another transaction.
The agreed format was the repayment time schedule of 5 million.
5 million. That's now, but the title for that to take place, the title needed to have transferred hands. Otherwise, why would I pay without the title?
That's correct.
Yeah. Then after that, to secure the obligation by ARL for this object of value, which is the shares, then there was another leg, which means if you fail to pay, I will defer the what? I will have a claim on those shares via bearer share warrants. And you warranty that you're going to pay. And if you fail to pay, then these bearer share warrants would then convert into ordinary shares.
Okay, and then just another short point, Mr. Mawebe, so that you can also clarify. Now, when ARL pledged pledged the security, the shares of SMM and TXZ, what percentage of shares was pledged? Was it completely everything?
100%, because
100% was pledged.
yeah,
As security.
that's right.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So I think that clarifies for today. I hope people out there, when you hear or read that so and so didn't pay, then you discover that the ownership as we define it changed hands. And that's
Okay.
the ownership.
Thank you very much also, because I see the time is gone. But I can just sum it up from the kind of discussion that we have. The acquisition by Lodi Docs of A97 and the New Age, and the similarity it has to the acquisition of SMM, which was acquired by ARL. So I think it was quite informative and very explanatory that indeed there was transfer of ownership to Africa Resource Limited. Ownership of SMM and TXZ, 100% ownership was transferred in order to discharge the obligation. So there was a transfer of ownership.
Yeah.
And I know some people can say other things, but there was indeed a transfer of ownership. And that same ownership was used as security, that was pledged in the transaction. So I think that is my summing up to the whole discussion that we had.
That's why they call you advocate, I think now. That's heads of argument.
Yes.
And with that, we come to the close of this program, and I do hope that as a listener out there, as well as a viewer out there, you found the information that was being shared very useful and informative and enlightening as far as vendor financing is concerned. I do hope that you now have a better understanding of what it is and what it is not, if you had assumed otherwise. Mr. Mawere, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And Mr. Advocate Magocha and Mr. Kyle, thank you so much for helping us to unpack this aspect of vendor finance. And I do hope that the listeners out there value your contribution and your participation on this program.
Thank you very much, guys. I hope you guys have a good evening and chat tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary, and all the listeners. It was a great time indeed.
And to the listeners, the conversation does not end here. It continues. And where can it continue? You can simply go to the 1873 network website, which is www.the1873network.org. Once you get there, sign up as a member. And once you have signed up as a member, connect with other individuals. Join the Financial Literacy Bank, where this conversation continues, so that we can have as many views as possible and help one another to better understand these terms and concepts that we use on a daily basis, but not have a shared understanding of. Coming up shortly is another insightful and informative program that is on building communities of individuals with shared interests. Stay logged at the 1873 TV, your vision, your power.